Africa speaks back. The voice, the truth, the continent on its own terms.
Africa has spoken. Now pass it on. Subscribe, like, share.
In a match no one saw coming, Burkina Faso's President Ibrahim Traoré just scored a hat trick against a team of African football legends. Yes, you read that right. The head of state stepped onto the pitch and netted 3 goals. Names like Jay-Jay Okocha, Emmanuel Adebayor, and Stéphane Mbia, players who once ruled the African Cup of Nations, were on the field. But it was the president who stole the show. So what kind of game is this? A political stunt? A publicity act? Here's the twist. What happened on that field wasn't just about football, it was a carefully staged message, one aimed not just at Burkina Faso but at all of Africa, and maybe even at the rest of the world. Across the capital, Ouagadougou, people didn't just cheer for goals, they cheered for hope, for a leader trying to unify a country shaken by conflict, for a message that says Africa can play as one. Traoré didn't just lead a team, he led a narrative, one that asked, can sports do what politics can't? Can unity be built with a ball at the center instead of a podium? So if you think this was just another PR photo op, think again, because what happened next revealed a lot more than who scored. Stay with us. By the end of this story, you'll understand why this match may be remembered as a turning point not just for Burkina Faso, but for how a new generation of African leaders are reshaping power. If stories like this matter to you, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this with someone who still believes in unity through action, and tell us in the comments, can football really change politics? Or is this just a one-time headline? Now let's take it from the opening whistle. He wasn't wearing a suit, no bodyguards walking him to a podium, no speeches, no teleprompters. Just a jersey, cleats, and a captain's armband. President Ibrahim Traoré walked onto the pitch like he belonged there, and for a moment, no one saw a head of state. They just saw another player ready for kickoff. But this wasn't just any game. On the other side of the field were men who once carried the pride of entire nations on their backs. Jay-Jay Okocha, Emmanuel Adebayor, Stéphane Mbia, Mamadou Niang, names that once electrified World Cup qualifiers and lit up stadiums across Africa. Legends. So what was a sitting president doing across from them, lacing up his boots and leading a team made up of bodyguards, civil servants, and close aides? Because that's exactly what happened. The president didn't just join the game, he captained it. The whistle blew. And the crowd? It didn't just cheer, it roared. What happened next looked, for a few minutes, like an underdog story in the making. The legends controlled the ball. Precision passes, clean footwork, flashes of brilliance that reminded everyone why they once wore their nation's colors. But then, something shifted. Burkina Faso's presidency team scored first. A swift counterattack finished by Commander Basil Zongo stunned the crowd. It wasn't just a lucky goal, it was well executed. And from the bench, Traoré stood and clapped. But he wasn't clapping for someone else. Minutes later, he was the one scoring. His first goal, a powerful left-foot strike from just inside the box, shook the crowd. His second, a surprising run past 2 defenders. His third, that was pure instinct. You could see it on people's faces. This wasn't just a football match anymore. It was metaphor made real. A leader taking the field with his people, not behind them, not above them, with them. And here's the real twist. No one expected him to actually be good. This wasn't a politician taking a ceremonial kick. This was someone playing with intention, passing sharply, reading the game. Celebrating not like a president, but like a teammate. We think that matters. Because in a region weighed down by coups, unrest, and broken promises, this kind of imagery hits different. What if leadership looked like this more often? What if power wasn't just about visibility, but presence? Burkina Faso has been through it. Security threats, economic pressure, political shifts. So seeing a young president, one who rose through the military ranks, step onto the field in sneakers and sprint past retired pros, that wasn't about football. It was about optics and maybe even healing. Because sometimes symbolism is stronger than a speech, And maybe, in a country struggling to feel united, this match wasn't staged for headlines. Maybe it was staged for them, the people who needed to feel proud of something again. What do you even call that? A PR stunt? A bold move? Or just something we rarely see from those in power? No matter how it's labeled, the effect was real. People clapped like it was the World Cup. Some cried, others laughed. But nearly everyone left saying the same thing. We've never seen a president like this. And that was just the first half. They came to play, but they didn't just play for fun. From the first touch, it was clear the legends hadn't flown in to take it easy. They came to remind everyone who they were. Okocha still danced with the ball like it was 2004. Adebayor's movement off the ball? Sharp. Direct. Stéphane Mbia controlled the midfield like he never retired. These weren't men phoning it in. They were here with purpose. So why show up at all? Why now? Why Traoré? Because this wasn't just a football match, it was a statement, a sign of solidarity, a show of unity not just with Burkina Faso's leadership, but with its people. Think about it. These men once represented separate nations. They now stood together on the same team, in the same jersey, on Burkinabe soil. That kind of image doesn't happen by accident. There's a weight to that. Especially in a region where fragmentation, coups, and foreign interference often dominate headlines. We think that's the real story here, the part that doesn't show up in the final score. If former national heroes, once rivals on the pitch, can come together like this, what does that say about what's possible off the field? Could the same spirit apply to diplomacy, to trade, to youth leadership? But here's what really struck us. At halftime, Traoré wasn't in a locker room behind closed doors. He was on the sidelines, laughing, talking, stretching like every other player. There was no VIP section, no separation. Just a man sweating beside his team in the same shoes as the rest of them. That might sound small. But in a world where so many leaders stay behind glass, seeing one literally covered in dust and grass hits different. Before Traoré, Burkina's last few leaders rarely appeared outside official ceremonies. Some ruled from a distance. Some ruled through fear. Traoré may not be perfect, no leader island, but moments like this, they feel like a deliberate choice. To be seen, to be reachable, to be real. And if leadership is, at its core, about trust, then maybe this match bought him something far more valuable than applause: belief. Now, not everyone saw it that way. Critics still question the cost, the optics, the intention, but even they admit there's never been a political message quite like this one. So whether you see it as a masterstroke or a media play, ask yourself, when was the last time a head of state made headlines for showing up like this? If you think more leaders should lead from the ground, not just the stage, drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this, if you believe power doesn't have to mean distance. And if this story resonates with you, share it, because some moments are bigger than the match. And this match, it was just getting started. By the second half, something had shifted. The match was still competitive, but now it felt personal. Not in a tense way, in a charged way. Like both sides realized this wasn't just about showing up, it was about showing something. That's when the legends fought back. First came Mamadou Niang's calm finish, classic striker's instinct. Then a laser from Mumuni Dagano that pulled the crowd to its feet. The scoreboard tightened, 3-2. Momentum started swinging, but even as the goals piled up, no one really cared about the score. Because by then, the story had taken over. You could feel it. Fans weren't just watching athletes, they were watching eras collide. Men in their 42nd who once carried the dreams of a continent, now facing off with a government trying to rebuild one. There's something surreal about that, isn't there? That shared language football, letting generations speak to each other in ways politicians never quite managed to. No speeches, no policy, just passes, movement, rhythm. We think there's something powerful there. Because if a football pitch can become a stage for connection, then maybe so can other spaces. Maybe classrooms, maybe council halls, maybe just maybe presidential offices too. Here's what stuck with us. Traoré didn't slow down. He wasn't there to pose. Even with legends chasing him down, he kept running, kept passing, kept directing. and the crowd noticed. A young man in the stand shouted, "That's our president, not just theirs, ours." There's a difference in that phrasing, a kind of ownership, a closeness. Before this, many young Burkinabe had only seen power from afar. Now they were seeing it sweat, miss passes, take hits, score goals. What do we gain when leadership feels reachable? What do we lose when it doesn't? Those are questions worth sitting with because not every country gets to ask them out loud. And when you zoom out, you realize this wasn't just about national pride. It was continental. African unity isn't just an idea, it's a challenge. One that's been stalled by borders, history, outside influence. But for 90 minutes, those borders blurred. Côte d'Ivoire's past shared a field with Togo's future. Nigeria played beside Senegal. They all wore the same kit. That didn't happen by accident. That's design. And that's message. The kind that doesn't need subtitles or spin because it's built into how people moved, passed, celebrated. And while the final score still mattered to some, the real scoreboard was emotional. And on that front, everyone won something. Not just pride, not just footage for the news cycle, but maybe a brief glimpse of the kind of Africa many still dare to imagine if only for a half. But as one legend said, walking off the pitch, it can't stop here. It wasn't just the players, people were watching, it was who stood beside them. Government ministers, military officers, local civil servants all playing. No ranks, no titles on jerseys, just names. First names. That choice felt intentional. In most countries, the powerful are guarded, surrounded by protocol. In this match, they were taking throw-ins, jogging after the ball, getting subbed out. There's something kind of radical in that if you think about it, because if power can put on a jersey and step into the mud, maybe it's not as untouchable as we're often made to believe. And people felt that. The atmosphere in the stands wasn't just celebratory, it was curious. You could hear questions in the crowd. Is that really the Minister of Defense? Wait, is that Traoré yelling for a pass? Those aren't questions you ask when watching a political rally. You ask them when something unexpected, something human is happening. This wasn't just a team of officials. It was a team of men willing to look a little silly, a little tired, a little too slow on defense, and somehow that made them feel more believable, more real. Here's the thing we keep coming back to. Leadership often hides behind perfection. But moments like these prove that authenticity tends to win more hearts than polish ever could. And in a country facing the weight of insecurity, economic stress, and international scrutiny, that kind of trust isn't cosmetic, it's strategic. What do we lose when politics becomes too polished to touch? What do we gain when it becomes visible, vulnerable, shared? For years, Burkina Faso has been fighting to rewrite its story, from colonialism to coups, from silence to resistance. And here in a 90-minute football match, a strange kind of rewrite unfolded. The men in power didn't just speak of unity. They kicked it, passed it, celebrated it, sometimes clumsily, but always publicly. And maybe, just maybe, that's what people needed to see. Not victory, not dominance. But leadership willing to sweat in front of them, not just talk behind them. You could say this was political theater, and maybe you'd be right. But even theater has power when the audience leaves feeling seen. And on that day in Ouagadougou, that's what most people walked away with. A memory, a question, and a quiet feeling that maybe things don't have to stay the way they've always been. That maybe, just maybe, the next act could look different. Not everyone on that pitch had a famous name, but everyone had something to prove. For some players on the presidential team, this was their first time playing in front of a crowd. For others, it was their first time playing against childhood idols. Imagine that. You re a mid-level aide or soldier. You work behind the scenes, read briefing papers, maybe drive a convoy, and suddenly you're side by side with the president and jogging toward Emmanuel Adebayor. That kind of moment doesn't just live in memory, it rewires how you see yourself. Because if the gap between them and us can shrink on a football pitch, can it shrink elsewhere too? We think it can. Or at least we hope leaders are paying attention to the possibility. There was a moment just before the second half when Traoré walked over to the opposition bench. He shook hands. He laughed with Jay-Jay Okocha. He hugged Dagano like an old friend. That moment wasn't broadcast live. No announcers called it out. But people in the stands saw it and talked about it. They said, "He doesn't act like a president. He acts like he belongs here." That could be a compliment or a critique, depending on where you stand, because to some, power is supposed to be distant, untouchable, stoic. But to others, especially a younger generation, real leadership looks a little more grounded. And in a country where so many feel left out of the system, this felt like something rare. A leader who shares the stage. It makes you wonder, if more presidents played football with their people, would more people believe in politics? Sure, maybe that's a stretch. Maybe not every country has an Ibrahim Traoré. But moments like these make you ask things you wouldn't otherwise ask. What would shift if leadership stepped off the stage and onto the same level? Would it restore trust? Would it inspire the next generation? Or would it just be another viral clip that fades after 24 hours? Honestly, it depends on what comes next. Symbolism without follow-through is just a good photo op, but symbolism with intention, that can crack open what felt stuck. What about you? Do you think this kind of moment means something long-term? Or is it all just a feel-good spectacle? We'd love to hear your take. Share this with someone who says, politics never changes. Because maybe, sometimes, it does. And if you were still watching, that says something too. Hit like if you believe representation isn't just about who speaks, but who shows up. Because what followed this match wasn't just applause, it was momentum. And it didn't stop at the final whistle. You could feel it in the air after the match. This wasn't just an event, it was the start of something. Not because of the goals, not even because of the crowd, but because of what came after. The conversations, the offers, the promises, the energy. Burkina Faso's government didn't just host this match, they followed it up. Traoré met with the visiting legends off the field, not behind closed doors, not in long speeches, but face to face. He asked them what they needed. He told them what the country could offer. And he did something a lot of leaders don't do. He listened. That alone speaks volumes. Because for years, former players' legends even have said they want to give back. But most times, the system doesn't give them a lane. Bureaucracy gets in the way. Politics, egos, silence. But what if a government actually opened the door? That's what this meeting symbolized, not just a post-match handshake, but an actual pivot. Traoré expressed a clear willingness to back sports initiatives, both in Burkina and across the continent. Infrastructure, mentorship, youth academies, and the players. They didn't just nod and smile, they showed up with ideas. One proposed a Trans-African Youth League. Another offered to run camps in rural provinces. It wasn't talk, it was planning. It's easy to forget that most of these legends didn't come from privilege. They came from dust fields, broken cleats, and borrowed jerseys. If anyone understands what opportunity can do, it's them. We think that's what made this moment real. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was vision shaped by experience, not politics. And here's what struck a lot of people. This wasn't just about building football, it was about building trust. Trust in the idea that government and citizens can collaborate, not just exist side by side. Is that idealistic? Maybe. But maybe we've forgotten how powerful the practical can feel when you've spent years seeing nothing but dead ends. For so long, sports in many African countries has been treated as an afterthought entertainment, not infrastructure. But what if that shifted? What if football wasn't just something to watch, but something to invest in, as talent development, as social cohesion, as economic opportunity? Because when you look at this moment through that lens, it's not just about a match, it's about a pivot point, one that could scale if the will holds. And for once, it seems like the people leading the conversation are the ones who've played the game. Not long after the match, something unexpected happened. Players started asking for a rematch. But not out of ego, not because they lost, because they felt something they hadn't felt in a while. They said it out loud. This wasn't just a game, it was a release, a reset, a reminder. Charles Cabaret, former Burkina Faso captain, the one who helped spark the idea, told local press, "It felt like being useful again, not just remembered." That line stuck. Because for retired athletes, especially in Africa, the end of a playing career can feel like the end of visibility. They go from carrying nations on their backs to being almost invisible off the field. What happens when greatness no longer has a jersey? Where does it go? And more importantly, who's responsible for helping it find purpose again? We think that's a cultural blind spot globally. The US reveres its legends, commentators, coaches, sports ambassadors. But for many African countries, the infrastructure to transition icons into mentors just isn't there. So what if that changed? What if moments like this didn't just bring back legends, but gave them a future, a role, a reason, a way forward? Because the truth is, we lose a lot when wisdom retires too early. These are men who've experienced discipline, pressure, international diplomacy, public scrutiny, all in their 22nd. Imagine channeling that into local leadership, youth training, peace building, health advocacy. Is it idealistic? Sure, but we've seen worse ideas get bigger budgets. The rematch they asked for wasn't about trophies. It was about keeping that fire alive, keeping the connection going, keeping the bridge between past and present open while it's still walkable. And if that kind of continuity became normal, not exceptional, imagine what else could follow. That might sound small, but if you've ever seen what happens when a country forgets its heroes, you'll know how much it costs to lose more than just games. Because when people feel discarded, they disconnect from systems, from communities, from hope. And when they feel seen again, when they're invited back in, they don't just show up, they invest, they build, they stay. And that, maybe more than anything else, is the power of a rematch. You know, a moment lands differently when people start calling it a symbol, not just an event. And that's exactly what happened in the days after the match. National media called it historic. Regional papers called it unprecedented. But most importantly, everyday people just started talking about it. Barbershops, classrooms, markets, buses, churches, group chats. People weren't quoting the scoreline, they were quoting the gestures, the laughter, the running, the presence. There was this moment captured by a fan's shaky phone where the president, mid-game, helped an opponent back to his feet. No photographers around, no ceremony, just a hand, a pause, a nod. And play continued. That's the kind of thing that sticks. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's rare. Rare to see power humanized like that. Rare to see leadership without walls. And we think moments like that, quiet as they are, can carry louder meaning than slogans ever could. Not everyone trusts it, of course. Some still think it was a performance, a calculated image. But here's the thing. Even if it was, it still happened. And sometimes the act itself matters more than the motive. Because a young boy who watched that match doesn't care about political strategy, he just saw a leader sweat, stumble, and smile. A local coach didn't read the headlines, he just saw former greats offering to run training camps. Before this match, none of that was happening. And afterward, there were meetings, plans, conversations. There was momentum. And momentum, when handled right when not wasted, can become movement. That's what this could be. Not a stunt, not a one-off, but a hinge. A pivot point, the kind that's only obvious years later, in hindsight. And maybe that's the point. Not every match is just about goals. Some are about signals. And this one, people felt it. In the end, maybe this match wasn't meant to be remembered for the score, but for the shift it sparked. A shift in how power shows up. A shift in how legacy is honored. And maybe a shift in how we imagine leadership in Africa and beyond. Now look, content like this isn't meant to glorify or to tear down. It's a lens, a perspective. We don't pretend to have all the angles or every piece of the puzzle. But when something feels culturally significant, we talk about it. And personally, I think the most powerful part wasn't the goals. It was the fact that so many people, from legends to kids in the stands, felt seen. I guess moments like that don't fix everything, but in my view, they remind us of what's possible when presence replaces distance. So yeah, you don't have to agree. But maybe it's worth watching moments like this a little closer. Not for the hype, but for what they say about who we are and who we could be. We've got another story coming soon, one that zooms in on a place most people aren't paying attention to, but probably should. Until then, stay curious, stay sharp, and as always, thanks for watching.